So just to kick off the conversation, Grace Durotimi, could you share with us a little bit of your background on how you initially decided to design your apps for the competition in terms of identifying an issue, thinking of solutions? Did you visually map these things out? Did you create a list of, what might be solvable?
I mean, for Ecolio, it was more of we just saw the issue of climate change. And especially around that time, climate change was more of an issue that was just coming out, I would say, in terms of there was not much awareness about the issue as there is now. So I guess we kind of saw that it was a really critical issue that we wanted to solve. And the reason why we chose games was mainly because the children of our generation are our future. So we thought that if it's better to have our app be targeted to them. And most children tend to learn better by playing games. So that's mainly how we got the idea to use games to teach about climate change. But,
yeah, and I say that for Lexis Learn, we really wanted to make sure that our app could help people, young people that are around our age. And we felt that it's a very important skill to be able to read and also be able to develop your vocabulary. And we thought that through Lexis Learn, we could do that in kind of an interactive way. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't just tell them to memorize a word. So when you come across a word, say when you read, like when you're reading an article, we wanted you to be able to find words that you didn't know and be able to take them away and have them in sort of a bank where you can actually learn them on your own.
So it sounds like for both of these apps, you were thinking about the end user, how they would actually use it, and how they would learn best, and then working backwards from there. Is that accurate? Or?
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. So it's very user-centric. I like that. So, and I'm using these words interchangeably, and I know they're different, but so when you were working on these apps, how did you, or did you conduct market competitor user research, and how did you do that?
I mean, for Lexis Learn, we were actually lucky. We created a survey on SurveyMonkey, and because in our school we have classes in each year, we literally just got the SurveyMonkey and sent it out to different classes, and that's how we got our data. And from there, we made an infographic with all of the data in so that we could clearly see it. But for Ecolio, we more kind of generalized the data in terms of we made a small survey and we went around to loads of our friends and family to try and get people to fill it out. And that's kind of how we got some of our data. But yeah.
Yeah. And I also say that for competitor research, I spent some time on this, being able to look up competitors and find out how we can make our app different from theirs. So like, for example, we have things like vocabulary.com or just places where you can just learn vocabulary. I also think they're for kind of tests such as the SATs or some English language tests, whereas our one's just for people who speak the English language normally. And so we just want to make sure that we really know who's going to be using our app. And so I just want to make sure that through the ability to be able to learn vocabulary from books that you read, that was kind of more unique in a sense.
Absolutely. So seeing where you fit into the market landscape and seeing the advantages of your competitors, and then also being able to directly ask, your target market, how would you like to use this, or how would you learn best with this? That's so interesting. And how would you say that research that you did, the SurveyMonkey or the looking at other competitors, influence the design or the functionality? Did you make significant changes to these apps based on those different ways of gathering research?
I say that when developing Lexis Learn, we were kind of looking for statistics on how often people actually read nowadays before they've actually come across the app. And we felt that it was kind of, as you get older, you actually read less and less. So it was something like for 19-year-olds, less than 20% of them are reading regularly. And so I thought this was kind of shocking. And so I think that in the app, I wanted to have a feature where you could kind of have a habit tracker that would track the amount of time that you read. And so yeah, it's basically a timer. And then for the amount of time you read, you gain points for that, depending on how long it is. And I guess that with the reason why I tried to include the points was to try and make it more kind of gamified and encourage you, was for a certain number of points you could reward yourself, or say if your parents are monitoring you using the app, they could kind of give you pocket money or something for however many points you get.
That's brilliant. It's almost like having a Fitbit tracker tracking the number of steps you take. That's really cool.
Yeah.
For Ecolio, it was more about the ease of use, I guess, because Ecolio was very much loads of different mini games in that sense. It was more about asking people to test the games and see whether this game is good or this game is bad, or how to improve games to make it more engaging. Because the main aspect of Ecolio was to get people engaged with the topic of climate change through games, which, and obviously those games have to be kind of engaging, but also it helps to get people enthusiastic. That's mainly how we got users to test our app, to see which games were really popular with some people and which games weren't with others. But yeah.
So measuring the user level of engagement. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Huh?
Oh, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if.
Oh no, I was finished. Sorry.
That makes a lot of sense, though. That yes, you want to see how much your users want to play certain games, and then measure that. And in terms of, did you end up cutting games though, if it seemed like, you know, only one or two people like them, or did you shift the game, you know, change the game?
We did end up cutting some levels because they were getting too complicated for people to play them. But we also shift some other ones to try and make them more rounded in terms of incorporating other ideas from some games, taking them and putting them into other games to try and incorporate both ideas and to try and make the game better overall. But yeah.
That's clever. So to be able to recycle what you have within your own project and just being able to look at the big picture and say, oh, it actually fits in better here. That's smart. Wonderful. So, you know, if you did change, you know, it sounds like you're saying you've changed for both of these apps, the functionality or the design or the context of, you know, certain aspects of the app. Were there any expectations that you felt like you had to manage over what you'd originally envisioned for these projects versus what actually ended up evolving? And, you know, was it disappointing that the first app didn't work out? Was it exciting to make changes? And as a team, because I know you worked within teams, you know, were there any folks who were harder to convince to keep moving forward versus others? And if so, how did you sort of motivate everybody to be on the same page?
I guess part of motivating everyone to get on the same page was mainly because of just reminding us about the main aspects of our app. Like for Lexis Learn, it was mainly to get people to improve on their vocabulary and to help them to increase their literacy. And by emphasizing those points, it kind of helps make people aware of why we're doing the app. And that also helps make people more aware of why we need to make some changes. If some people aren't liking this, then how can we change it to make it better? Or if this isn't so good, what can we add to make it better, if that makes sense? So it's more just about looking at the main focus of our project and just reminding each other why we're doing it, and hopefully emphasizing why we need to make some changes if some people aren't so keen on them. But
yeah. I say that when I was making the app mainly, there were limitations that I had to overcome, and this is because of the time constraints with the deadline for Technovation. And so I found that in my mind, I had so many different functionalities I wanted to include, but obviously I couldn't be able to do them all. And also I say that I was using App Inventor, which I guess is good for an introduction to making apps, but in the future, I would have thought it would be better to use something perhaps more advanced like Android Studio. And so this, I guess, limited the functionality. So I say that an additional feature to Lexis Learn, apart from the reading timer that was a habit tracker, was also the ability for vocabulary quizzes. And so we thought that whenever you add a word to Lexis Learn, you have to set the vocabulary bank. And so you can test yourself in that bank regularly through a vocabulary quiz. And I was hoping that it wouldn't just be kind of a, what is the meaning of this word? And you have to type in. It was a multiple choice. And I also wanted to include other types of quizzes that would be more interactive, but we didn't have time to include all of those. So I say that in the context of Technovation, you have to think about what is the main function that you want to include, the kind of minimal viable product.
That is such an interesting point, Grace, because yes, you do have this limited amount of time and limited resources to accomplish what you're accomplishing. And so if I think of it like a pie, and if several pieces of those pie go to redeveloping things that you thought were going to go a certain way, and then you may not have the other pieces of pie. Was making sense in my head, I'll drop that analogy, but you won't be able to, continue doing that extra work and development that may have developed that product to the complexity that you had originally hoped. So that's an interesting point. In terms of students who are watching this right now, we do have some students who are watching this live stream right now, or for the future students watching the video. What guidance would you offer them for how they approach this research and redesign cycle? Are there brainstorming exercises that you found helpful at any stage of the process, from initial to through the redesign? And then also, it sounded like you solicited feedback from expected groups. Did you ever ask, feedback from people who were not in your target demographics, and how did that help your process? And then, were there things that it sounds like, Grace, you're saying you would pick a different tool perhaps to do the development. Are there other things that you would do if you were starting a new app or project today in terms of speeding up this process of finding the things that you would change and incorporating those changes?
In terms of tips and guidance, I would just try and make the use of the people around you. We were very lucky because when we were doing Technovation, we had a whole school that we could go out to and be asking in terms of market research, especially for target demographics. And doing something like a Survey Monkey is very easy to send out to people. It's just, if you can just send it out by email, and then once you send it out to teachers, you can encourage those teachers to send it out to your class. And if you have like 4 or 5 classes, you've already got around about over 100 people averagely if you have about 30 in the class. So I guess it's just making the most of your situation, because if you're in that environment, the more data you can get, the better in some ways, because then it helps to tailor your app more towards your target demographic. And in terms of brainstorming processes, I guess mind mapping is probably a really good one. Like if you have a broad idea such as, let's just say, the environment, you can mind map loads of different issues that are linked to that. For example, one would be climate change, but there's also animal cruelty, because obviously if we change the environment, we're destroying habitats that may be impacting animals. But also there's stuff about biodiversity within that. And I guess it's just mind mapping helps to focus your ideas, because that helps also to focus your app towards your target demographic as well. Because if you choose a broad topic, it can be hard to make that app stand out in a sense, because you want it to be an app that's unique as well. That's why it's important to kind of break down your main topic into something that you can just target for your solution. But,
Yeah. I say that when we were filming the pitch video for LexisLearn as well, we actually not only went to students who will be using our apps, we also went to English teachers. We thought that they would have an interesting perspective on how students should be reading and should be learning vocabulary these days. And so we were able to film them and include them in our pitch video. This helped us kind of reinforce the idea that our app would be actually useful and be able to help our target audience. And I say that recently I've also come across a concept called design thinking. And this is when you're trying to think about not only the tech aspect and what you're building, but also its place in the market, its place in the wider world. And we thought that I say that when you're using the process of design thinking, you also have to think about the physical kind of personas of who's going to be using your app. So you could actually be able to kind of brainstorm a person who would be using your app and think about what is the situation where someone would need this app. And so you can think about the exact features that your app should have. And I'll also say that this process is kind of iterative, because as you continue to add features to your app, you need to kind of go back to the end users and make sure it's actually going to be used by them. So being able to constantly test your app on the people who are supposed to be using it will be really helpful.
That's very interesting. Oh, maybe I'm hearing myself echo. I was thinking that someone was trying to say something. It's an interesting point, Grace, when you were speaking, especially to physical personas of who've used your app. You're sort of, is it case use studies, sort of like saying like, okay, this is a student who doesn't like to read right now, so we need to find ways to motivate them. And I could see them using this app because their parent has said, you're not going to get pocket money until I know that you're reading 20 minutes a day. Is that what you mean when you say that, or
Oh
what's
yeah, I definitely say that that's really helpful. Be able to actually kind of, yeah, those percentages that you said are the kind of examples I was thinking about when I was making the app. So I thought that'd be really useful to, you know, have the point system, also have the vocabulary quiz aspects. So yeah, that aspect was really helpful in being able to make sure that our app was actually going to be applicable in the wider world.
That's awesome. That's a great idea. And I also like that you pointed out that the ability to constantly test your app is really helpful, because if it's always growing, always changing, you need to be able to make sure that it's working in the way that you want it to, even if that way evolves. And Durotimi, I like when you talk about taking advantage of the fact that you are sitting in a large user market. If you're going to a school, traditional school where you have, 30 kids in a class, that's an ideal place to be able to turn around and say, hey guys, come check out our app and tell us what you think. And I also appreciate how you said that these very, wonderful, like, the UN SDG goals, where we're thinking of these very broad issues like climate change, to break it down from there, to distinguish your idea from all the other solutions that might be out there, and to think about what makes your solution unique compared to what already exists or what may exist in the future. So I think that's a really great perspective to have. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? I feel like we've covered so much ground in a short period of time, that I hate to end the conversation soon. Is there anything from your experiences that you want to share on this sort of topic, or anything else?
I mean, I guess one thing is important. One thing that's important is that when doing competitor/user research, try to sometimes actually test the apps as well, because that's one thing that I know I remember doing with Lexis Learn, because I actually used a vocabulary app called Magoosh, I think it was, and it had loads of lists of vocabulary, and we were just testing myself on them. One thing that I thought that Lexis Learn could take advantage of was the fact that we let our users put in their own words, like as they're reading. If they find a word that they don't understand, they can put it into the app and it can be added straight to the quiz. Whereas Magoosh already had set lists of words for like specific tests, which can be quite daunting and I guess detached, because the words that they have in those tests may not be words you actually want to know the meanings of. And it may just be like random words that you don't really refer to as much. That's why I think it's better to have that personalized feature of letting our users input their own words, which is something that I may not have actually come up, or we may not have actually come up with if we didn't actually test out other apps. So as much as it's important to research other competitors, it's also important to try and test their solutions and compare it with yours, see what makes theirs unique, and try and incorporate that into your own app, or see if you can make your app more unique by reflecting on what they've done, if that makes sense. But yeah.
I'd say that Technovation as a whole process is very useful for me, at least, because I was able to gain a lot of new skills and also get more passionate about technology. So in terms of the skills I learned, I was able to, be able to work better in a team and also be able to delegate. And I guess in terms of app making as well, using App Inventor was really useful in being able to develop my technical skills as well. And so I felt like this was really helpful. And also the ability to actually think about your community more, and also think about what are the problems in your community and how can technology solve it. And I'll also say that for participants kind of beyond the competition, we should also be looking at kind of evolving technologies and how that could even be used in your Technovation submission as well. So, I heard that last year's participants who were able to go to World Pitch, they had like very advanced technologies, kind of using machine learning, I saw with some ones as well. Also, not only using a software app, but also using physical components as well. So I think that was very useful. So be able to think kind of outside of the box and beyond Technovation, what are you gaining from this process that's going to last you in the future as well?
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something, Durotimi?
Oh, no, not yet.
Sorry. I so appreciate that. And I think that's very helpful. Yes, absolutely. To be able to be thinking about, what's coming, what's advancing in terms of technologies, and to be able to use that in your projects going forward. And also, I love the idea, Durotimi, about looking at your competitors, not just from, well, we do this and they do this, but if they do this, how can we do this as well? Or make it different or similar, like to really put things, my analogies are just not there this morning, to put them together and to think about, where do these things line up and how can ours be different? So I appreciate that. I see we have some conversation going in the chat. I don't see any questions at this time. I do see that some folks are agreeing, with Grace, talking about, the focus on the web design, but now they're also motivated to do app development, and that they also appreciate Android Studio as well. So that's wonderful. Well, I really appreciate, both of you being here for today's conversation. Grace and Durotimi, I thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us today. I know that everyone, including myself, learned a lot about research on how the impact of an evolution of an idea or project can occur, and how staying flexible, nimble with our coding and with our teamwork can help shape a solution that meets our needs. So if there's no further questions or comments or anything, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And for the students and teachers who are on our live chat, thank you for joining us. And remember you can join us again this Thursday for another episode of the Solve It team. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.